Hi, 1990 has been a pretty good year for C64, so we have quite a few interesting games to cover. Here's 10 I picked for today. Golden Axe is a conversion of Sega's coin-op and one of the most historically famous beat-em-ups to date. The story behind all the hammer bashing, axe slashing and sword stabbing that we'll be doing is surprisingly simple, but late 80s early 90s were not known for the depth of the storylines, and in many cases there were just a few lines of text, often on a black background with an image to follow. Optional image, I must add. Here, it's not that different. An evil ruler known as the Death Adder, which reminds me of a fantastic British comedy series Blackadder with Rowan Atkinson, along with his forces, kidnapped and imprisoned the king and his daughter, stole the legendary and titular Golden Axe, and installed himself as the ruler of the kingdom. By force perhaps, but he did, and now he's the big boss. Golden Axe allows you to pick one of 3 different warriors to play as, each with their own motivation to hunt down the tyrant. Gaelius Thunderhead from the Mines of Woluwe, whose twin brother was killed by Death Adder's forces. Barbarian ex-warrior, the only one out of the 3 that's nameless, and wielding a 2-handed broadsword seeking revenge for a murder of his mother. And if you know what's good for you, you do not stand between the man and his mother. Well, unless you're a woman that the man is in love with, then yeah, you do have a chance there to win an argument or two, but realistically, that's pretty much it. And as much as you can achieve in that kind of a situation. And finally, longsword sporting Amazon, Tyrese Flair, who lost both of her parents to Death Adder. Each of the heroes has his/her own weapon and special magic abilities, which for all intents and purposes work as a screen-clearing power attacks. And they all just power through right, all the way from the first to the last stage, killing what feels like armies worth of bodies and occasional bosses. Until the eventual clash with Death Adder himself. Some enemies ride dragons or scorpions, but they can be knocked off and the mounts taken, so that you could use their special attacks for yourself. There are also blue and green, and I don't really know how to call them here really, maybe Smurf wannabes, as they're small and wear odd hats, but they're definitely taller than 2 apples. And all Smurfs are 2 apples tall. Anyway, they provide magic power upgrades and health respectively, and to acquire this you need to kick the living shit out of them. And I mean it literally, as they best respond to the kick to the tooth. Odd. Anyway, as C64's arcade conversions go, this one may not be the best, but it's pretty damn good, with nice and easily distinguishable sprites, decent sound design and stellar gameplay. And the only thing that's really missing is the multiplayer. But some concessions had to be made to have it play as well as it does on Commodore's little powerhouse. Rick Dangerous 2 is one of the last platformers to come out on all major 8 and 16-bit platforms concurrently, and this C64 port is amazing. It's easily the best out of all 8-bit versions and nearly on par with its bigger 16-bit outings too, in terms of all graphics and sound design. Rick Dangerous 2 is a direct follow-up to the first game and starts with aliens landing in London. Since our hero cannot stand for his hometown being invaded, he heads off to face them. And while he lost his indie-like coat and hat in this entry, the adventuring and puzzling is retained and better than ever. Tougher too, but that was to be expected. The plot will take you through 4 areas of Hyde Park, ice caverns, forest and atomic mines, and a 5th, hidden one that reveals itself after the first 4 are completed. And it's a fat guy's caverns. That ends with a clash with said fat guy. Though for the sake of being politically correct, I would like to call him Bacon Challenged Individual, as in being so addicted to bacon that he can't go a meal without it. Don't fact check that, let's both agree that it's in the lore and carry on carrying on. Naturally, same as in the original Rick Dangerous, it is really just a glorified memory game and will give you a run for its money, punishing you all along the way. One mistake after another. So all the enemy placement, dozens of deadly and well-hidden traps, all of it will kill you time after time after time after time after time again, until you memorize it all and learn the best and only way through each stage. And while memory games are not my favorite, because, you know, mine's jack shit, Rick makes a very strong case for them with its stellar presentation, beautifully and well thought out levels, and addictive gameplay. So, as much as I want to, I can't dislike it. It's great and easily one of the most iconic platformers on C64. There are some differences between this and the first Rick, other than his attire, however, and they make for a much more involving gameplay this time. For one, Rick does not use gun anymore and has an alien blaster instead. And while this may mainly be a decorative change, as it works more or less identically, the second, so bombs, have been modified considerably. You can actually slide them to destroy the obstacles at distance or send them towards enemies that are away too. And finally, instead of a stick, you have a punch now, which given Rick's Indiana Jones-like character is much more fitting. Funny enough, Rick Dangerous 2 ends on a cliffhanger, suggesting that the third would be a final conclusion to his story, which seems appropriate as the original Inji was also a trilogy. But, as with many games that originated on 8-bit systems, a follow-up never came. If you like the first one, or enjoy difficult memorization-based platformers, this one's as good as they come, and it should definitely land as a mainstay in your C64's library. Strider 2 is a follow-up to the first game and also a port of Capcom's famous arcade coin-op. It's a side-scrolling action-adventure platformer in which you play as Hinjo as opposed to first game's Hiryu, a modern ninja/assassin/good guy all rolled into one. How an assassin can also be a good guy? I suppose it depends on where you stand on his profession and what kind of morals/code he follows, but that's the case here, so let's not dwell on it too much and just accept it for what it is and him for who he is. The aliens have captured Planet Magenta's leader, and it's up to you to go on a long rescue mission. Why would you do that and risk your neck for a politician, you may wonder? Well, the aforementioned leader happens to be a rather hot young lady, and you, being the hormones-buzzing warrior for good, are a bit charmed by her and just can't say no. I mean, you may be a warrior now, but you see yourself as an excellent future arm candy to hang around her and treat her not only as your lover, but also sugar mama. The game is composed out of 5 multi-directional scrolling levels that will take you through the entire planet. You'll face many enemies on your way, though not as many as you did in the first entry, and they will naturally be of numerous sorts, from deadly birds through enemy soldiers all the way to the missile-spamming robots. As usual, you're armed with your energy sword and a laser gun, which is a bit odd as arcade originals swap laser for shurikens, but whatever, it is what it is, and back then we didn't question the choices, we were happy we had a game to enjoy. Our hero can naturally cartwheel as good as a world-class gymnast that he is, scale walls and hang from ceilings. So he's a budget Spider-Man, for a lack of a better comparison. If you've played the first game, second won't be a surprise. Each level ends with a boss fight for which you can somehow, and I can't explain how and why, change into a robot. And it's another difference from the arcade original, which removed the ability in sequel and replaced it with an orb hovering around Strider and soaking in potential damage. A notable change, but once more, no one cared back then. If you played the first game on C64, first change that you'll notice are the graphics, which are considerably worse. The sprites are smaller and everything somehow feels blue. So, while it doesn't owe anymore, I'm sure you appreciate it running a bit smoother and playing a bit better too. Not so well for Strider to be considered a good game, but it's a bit less difficult at least. So, if you're into the genre, it may be worth a look. If I'm to be honest though, C64 had many other and better action platformers, so perhaps just try one of these. I often hear people talking about Wings of Fury as DOS original that was then ported to other systems. And while the second part of the sentence is correct, the first isn't. Cause I don't often hear people talking about all this at all, and it's mainly me and an occasional comment from some of you, which I actually really appreciate, even if I can't always answer them all. Wings of Fury actually released on Apple II first, before being converted to anything else. Sure, it may have been a bigger success on other systems than on Apple, but the fact remains. It's a side-scrolling action shooter in which you assume a role of a pilot of American F-6F Hellcat hailing from USS Wasp aircraft carrier during World War II fighting against Japanese. The game is split into few levels in which you're tasked with elimination of the enemy forces on nearby islands, destroying their bunkers, AA guns, barracks and soldiers, and protecting your aircraft carrier from the enemy planes. Other than your limited in ammo guns, you can also arm your craft before taking off with either bombs, rockets or torpedoes, and these may be required to complete some of the missions. If you ever run out of either of the three or ammo, you can always land back on your USS Wasp to restock and refuel. Some missions may also task you with sinking Japanese destroyers, battleships or carriers, and the gameplay is heavily action-focused, rarely giving you a time for a breather. Interestingly enough, Japanese version of the game that never released on C64 because of the system's virtual non-existence in the country reversed the roles, and in it you play as Japanese pilot set against Americans. Since we're on the subject of Commodore's Dream Machine, its port of Wings of Fury is excellent and easily as good as those released on bigger systems. I mean, sure, it's not a huge game with a lot of different assets and complicated story with multiple endings, just an arcade shooter, but as these go, this one's great. It looks phenomenal, it runs super smooth, and sounds fantastic. If you like those experiences, don't skip it, it's a must-play. The original arcade Dynasty Wars was one of my favorite early beat-em-up coin-ups, so having a C64 port at home was a dream come true. Well, only it wasn't, but let's not jump far ahead and get there in a more natural pace of slowly progressing disappointment. An evil tyrant Dong Zhuo, along with his equally as evil organization of Huang Qing, has taken over a large chunk of China and destabilized the Han dynasty. And it's up to you to pick one of 4 historical warriors to control and bring peace back to the country by means of heavy ass-kicking, punches to the gut, and headbangs galore. Not necessarily in this configuration and order, but you'll be setting bodies straight with use of painful and often deadly force. So, you can play as Zhang Fei, who fights with a halberd, Liu Bei, who sports a broadsword, Guan Yu fighting with a pole, and Zhao Yun with a pike. And while all of these have different stats and weapons, it's the arcade version where the differences between them are the most prominent. On C64, I've failed to see any noticeable variations between them. At least none that would make one choice more appealing over the other. So, you have to travel through numerous side-scrolling sections beating slug monsters and shadowy creatures. Only not really, they're supposed to be evil rulers rebel forces, but on C64 they all look like grey-blackish spots of ink smudged over 15 pixels in size sprites. They look fugly and animate as great as they display in their full low-res glory. The color scheme that the devs chose for them on C64 is just terrible, and in most levels they do a great job of looking like an undefined part of the background rather than the enemies to beat. Your characters are no better either, sporting 2 free colors at most, so overall it's more of a stain-on-stain combat with indistinguishable attacks than an arcade port of anything. It looks as if someone attempted to make a different Golden Axe port, but knew nothing about video game design and made only bad decisions along the way. Like every one of them, one after another. Sounds and controls are not much better either, so while I adore the arcade original, I would never recommend this to anyone. So, terrible presentation, disappointing and boring gameplay and substandard sound effects make Dynasty Wars a dynasty to be consumed by a passage of time and ultimately and hopefully forgotten. Flimbo's Quest is an Amiga original, pretty fun adventure platformer and a stellar port to C64. Mad scientist Franz Dendroff, seeking eternal life after years of failure, finally managed to create a machine that can sustain him indefinitely. Years of disappointing results and experiments on himself, however, caused his body to age rapidly, so, to use the machine and de-age himself, he has to rely on his creation constantly. And the machine requires fuel. It needs to be fed life energy from his captured victims. So, Franz Dendroff had to rebrand himself from mad scientist to mad scientist/serial killer. And without blinking of an eye, he did just that. Unfortunately for him though, one of his captives happens to be Pearly, a beauty like no other, and our protagonist, Flimbo's beloved. And while Flimbo may look like a cap and trainers wearing chav only, he's no slouch and he'll do anything and everything to save his darling. So, with Pearly gone, Flimbo's quest is born. A quest to find and rescue her and set Franz Dendroff straight, as in horizontally straight spread on the floor on which he'll end up lying when knocked out with expertly delivered uppercut or a roundhouse kick. Flimbo's Quest is composed out of 7 rather large levels, in which you, playing as our young lad, have to find and secure 7 codes needed to shut down Dendroff's supercomputer and save Pearly from being experimented on and/or consumed. You know, with those evil brainiacs you just never really know how far they're willing to take things. So, consumption is not out of the question here. Codes are not lying around the levels willy-nilly though, just waiting to be picked up, but are instead carried by many of the evil doctor's creatures. So, you need to kill as many of them as necessary to get them, and then use those to unlock the happy ending. Which is the only ending other than the death ending that by definition is not happy. Still, while the game is rather demanding, overflowing with numerous bodies at all times, you get to collect coins too, and these can be used in shops to purchase useful items to help Flimbo. Weapon upgrade doubles the range and power of your weapon, magic potion gives you 30 seconds of immunity to all damage, hourglass extends time you have to complete the level, letter scroll naturally gives you another letter to complete the code, and believe it or not, for 2,500 gold you can also buy a complete code, allowing you to skip the entire level. Flimbo's Quest's sonic and visuals are fantastic, using 64's chips to the fullest, and gameplay is fun and action-packed. If you're someone who enjoys a good platformer, there were hardly many better on the system in 1990. DuckTales: The Quest for Gold is probably the first cinematic action-adventure game that I've ever played. Well, at least knowingly and noting the fact mentally. And yes, I really mean cinematic, and yes, on C64. The overall story of the gameplay places you in the shoes, nay, top hat and suit of Scrooge McDuck in a competition with another billionaire duck, Flintheart Glomgold, with aim to get the most wealth in a given time. 30 days, to be precise. Is it a lot or not much? It's hard to tell, but what is not hard is telling you how fun of a game it is. And despite its simplicity, it's great. It's basically a collection of various mini-games that you'll be participating in and flying to different parts of the world between these games. You're naturally not going about it all yourself, being the one of two richest ducks in the pond, and you'll send your three nephews, Huey, Dewey and Louie, along with your trustworthy pilot, Launchpad McQuack, to do your bidding. The flight sequence between the location is a mini-game of its own too, in which you have to avoid clouds and things that Beagle Boys drop on your plane trying to damage it. If you crash, you lose money and a few days of oh so precious time, so if anything, this is the most crucial part of the game not to fail in. Cause while the money can be earned in many places, time cannot be reversed. I mean, if it could, wouldn't most of us be Bitcoin billionaires now? I know I would. Anyway, there are 4 mini-games you can participate in to earn money. Mountains and jungle stages are platforming based and require you to get to the end of the level unscathed, collecting chests. Then there's a cave labyrinth which you must navigate through, also collecting chests, avoiding traps and seeking exit. And finally, wildlife reservation, in which you take pictures of animals. The rarer the animal, the more money you get for them. So, for instance, a pink elephant is worth much more than the regular boring-ass zebra. All of these stages, other than the photography ones, can have Beagle Boys show up and try to undermine your progress, so you have to be vigilant. Like a hawk. I mean, like a duck. You can also dive in your money vault, in which you can occasionally find a rare coin worth extra money or play the stock market from time to time, but these two are to be considered a supplemental source of income, with minigames being the major ones. When 30 days have passed, the duck billionaire with more money will be a winner, and also a duck billionaire with just a little bit more money. Graphics and sounds are great and look as if they were taken straight from the show and lifted to the absolute best C64 could handle. The Quest for Gold may not be a game to replay all the freaking time like a maniac, but every now and then it's a fun, action-packed refresher between deeper or bigger experiences. The evil wizard Zax, a longtime antagonist of our hero Dizzy, has returned and cast terrible spells on 6 members of the Yolkfolk, friends of Dizzy, and then he transported them to a remote kingdom known as the Magicland. So now you, playing as Dizzy, have to go to the Magicland, find a way to lift the terrible spells of your friends and save them. And let me tell you, these spells are something else. Your friend Dylan, like Dylan from Beverly Hills 90210, is transfigured into a thorny bush. Denzel is frozen in ice, Dozy is put into an enchanted sleep, like the Sleeping Beauty but more round like an egg, Dora is turned into a frog, and she's funny enough a protagonist of a much later Amiga game Super Frog, only not really and not at all, Daisy is enlarged and kept in Zack's dungeon, and Grand Dizzy is trapped inside the magic mirror like Dorothy. Was that Dorothy? I don't remember, but I think it was her. Anyway, Magicland Dizzy is an adventure platformer and the 6th game in the long-running and immensely popular series, covering adventures of hard-boiled egg individual known as Dizzy. And if you wonder why is he called Dizzy out of all things, it's because ladies get dizzy when looking in his large googly eyes. Or, and that's as probable reason, cause he spins. He spins so much whenever he's jumping. Many of the locations in the game are well known and inspired by real-life places or those found in fairy tales, so seeing Stonehenge for instance should not be a surprise, even if in Magicland it's known as Weirdhenge. As all other Dizzy games, this one's not side-scrolling and relies on flip-screen movement, which while not as smooth is considerably less resource-hungry and is something that was more important on those weaker of 8-bit systems. Each of the screens, so locations that you get to visit, is built out of various platforms and ladders and features different egg dishes, I mean different Yolkfolk characters and items to interact with or collect. Dizzy can walk and jump to navigate obstacles and can carry up to 3 items at once that then can be used in various locations throughout the game to advance the plot or solve puzzles. Puzzles are mainly but not only fetch quests, but for the time that the game released in as an arcade platformer, Magicland Dizzy had very little serious competition in its subgenre other than the other games in its own series. Truth be told, I was never a huge fan of Dizzy games, but despite that I understand both their appeal and popularity. It's not a surprise to anyone watching these videos of mine that many of the early video game tie-ins to movies were pretty terrible. Well, some were just bad, it's not like all were absolute trash, but it was something that most of us knew and expected. Still, we were fools back then, most of us, because we still bought and copied these games hoping that one would somehow, magically, despite odds stacked against it, end up being good. A hidden gem among the sea of dirt, so to speak. And a title worth not only the movie it was based on, but also our time and money. Well, truth be told, piracy was very prominent here back then, so I'm not gonna lie to you, the cost for me for a compilation tape of 10 to 20 C64 games was much lower than for most of you. But it was not my choice to be born here and have virtually no access to original games. It's different now naturally, and all the games that I get are original releases. In fact, I've more than made up for all the years of questionable choices, but late 80s and early 90s here were times when it was much easier to trip over a random box of copied tapes somewhere rather than find a single genuine copy. Anyway, point is, with each game that followed the movie, regardless where we were in the world, we all hoped for something great and were usually disappointed. Enter Back to the Future 2. A tie-in to one of my most favorite sci-fi comedies of all time and an all-time classic. It had to be amazing, cause botching such a fun concept was nigh impossible, right? Right. Well, I'm sure you know the answer already. Sadly, it's no better than the rest of the despicable money grabs made just to cash in on popularity of accompanying movies and not for gamers to enjoy. Back to the Future 2 is composed out of 5 different levels, loosely based on scenes from the movie. So you, playing as Marty McFly, travel with Dr. Emmett Brown to the future to year 2015 to prevent yours and your future wife and now girlfriend's kids from turning out badly. In first level, you're on a hoverboard, which I'm totally unironically pissed about, in particular that it still doesn't exist yet in 2024, and you zoom around Hill Valley, avoiding Biff and his goons. The second level is more of a puzzle, in which you have to, in an overhead view, guide Jennifer, your girlfriend/wife, out of the house while preventing her from seeing her future self. Cause you know, the continuum of time could be forever disrupted and things could go wrong. Third level takes place back in 1985, that's been changed by 1955's Biff, who acquired a sport almanac from the future and cashed in hard on knowledge of all future sports results, and it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Fourth level is a sliding puzzle which you must arrange to form a picture of Marty playing in a band. Last and fifth level is very similar to the first in that you travel from left to right through Hill Valley again, avoiding Biff's men and trying to get the sports almanac back from his car to set the timeline straight. And this is where the second game ends and the story carries on in the third, which as you can probably guess is not much better. Now, to be clear, Back to the Future 2 is not trash. It's basically 5 minigames themed to follow the movie, but they're tied together very loosely and are not great on their own, so overall it's an average game at best, regardless how you wanna approach it as a fan of the film or its own thing. Commodore 64 is a machine that keeps surprising me to this very day, especially with how much was possible to achieve on it with as little as it had hardware-wise. I mean, sure, when it spawned it was a powerful and advanced system, but by 1990 it was a granddad, years behind in capabilities and resources as compared to the new, powerful and shiny 16-bit crowd of teenage powerhouses like Sega Genesis, Commodore's own Amiga or PC. And yet, people not only played games on it, but also kept releasing them too. And some of the late ones were absolute best experiences the system could offer. King's Bounty, often touted as spiritual predecessor to Heroes of Might and Magic or even Heroes of Might and Magic Zero by some, is just that. Incredibly fun and immersive game that's just fantastic, and a title that shouldn't have ever released on it, let alone work so great. It's a turn-based role-playing strategy mixture unlike anything to date. It takes place in a world known only as the Four Continents, ruled by King Maximus, who keeps it in check and peace with use of a powerful magical artifact called the Scepter of Order. If peace was upheld forever, however, we'd had no game to play though, so something must have disturbed it. In this particular case, it was a dragon named Arek Dragonbreath. An amazing name, I must add. It's like being called John Human Stink, but whatever, it is what it is. And the evil creature allied itself with a demon king, who with use of a portal spell stole the magical scepter. An ancient prophecy says that when the king has no scepter and dies, the kingdom will be there for the taking. So the dragon plans to wait, which you know for the near-timeless creature and his body of a demon is not a problem, until the king kicks the bucket. So, to not let the scepter fall in the wrong, or in this particular case right hands, Dragon buried it and tore them up, leading to the burial site into 25 pieces. 17 are kept by his trusty followers and 8 are hidden with the artifacts of power. You play as a hero tasked by the king of recovering a scepter within a time limit. There are 4 classes available to play as: Knight, Barbarian, Paladin and Sorceress, each of them differing in terms of stats of magic and leadership, and their strengths and weaknesses. The map of 4 continents is rather large and contains many cities and castles. Treasures, artifacts and enemy placement on it, however, is randomized on each playthrough, making for a very replayable title. Each day you can travel over a distance of 40 moves on all terrains other than the desert, which is a terrible, awful nightmare to be going through, and I don't recommend crossing it unless you've no other choice, as you can only make 1 move on it per day. There's 5 days in a week, so it's clear that the 4 continents are not on Earth, and same as in future Heroes games, with each week passed you get an income of gold depending on your level, class, number of conquered castles and mines. And that money can be used to purchase units. Well, spells too, but mostly units that will form your soon-to-be unbeatable army that you will take to any and all battles that you'll be involved in. And while magic is important in King's Bounty, it's set armies and their strength that will ultimately decide on the success or failure of your quest. Combat takes place on separate tactical screens and places units of both armies on opposite sides of it, attackers on the left and defenders on the right. Arguably, King's Bounty is not a complex or difficult game as compared to Heroes of Might and Magic, but it's one that was clearly a prototitle for hits of the future and a very fun and enjoyable romp to waste some time in, chasing that elusive scepter and trying to save the kingdom. Interestingly enough, if you ever manage to get your hands on the scepter earlier and deliver it to the king, the game will end then and there, even if you've very little progress in the maps of 4 continents. All in all, King's Bounty is a gem in C64's library and a must-play for all fans of the genre and the system. So, how do you like today's 10? By 1990 it was clear that perhaps it was the time for all C64 users to move to newer and more powerful 16-bit systems, but neither they nor developers gave up on it yet, and it still had a strong enough user base for the new games to release on it. And some of these late releases were the best that the system ever got, and titles definitely worth a look. What do you think of them though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.